Watch this.
"30 months in prison for one afternoon in the Capitol, illegally." Another Idahoan hears her sentence for her involvement in the January 6th riot. You know that part about things you say being used against you in a court of law? Yeah, they did that. Meanwhile, at Idaho's Capitol today, the division within the Idaho GOP was on full display. Party leadership has made it clear, no open primaries. But a lot of other Republicans are pretty open to the idea. They tried to make it seem less damaging than it was. Relocation, internment, assembly centers. But for those who were there and their families, it's taken years to call it what it was: incarceration. And they don't want anyone to forget it. Historically, other than a deterrent to crime, sending someone to prison is supposed to be about retribution and rehabilitation. Today, the U.S. government got its retribution, but they likely don't expect any lesson to be learned in this case. A federal judge sentenced Yvonne St. Cyr today to 30 months in prison. She's the Meridian woman involved in the January 6th riots at the U.S. Capitol back in 2021. The same Meridian woman who told us a year after the fact she doesn't regret what she did. She's been convicted of 6 counts, including interfering with police officers during a civil disorder, entering and remaining in a restricted building or grounds, and disorderly and disruptive conduct. To this day, St. Cyr contends she did nothing wrong. Andrew Bartline followed the sentencing for us today, and she's had a lot to say leading up to today and even after the sentencing. Andrew?
Yeah, and it's really been through her Facebook account, ironically, the same outlet where a lot of January 6ers have self-incriminated. The Department of Justice wanted her to serve 33 months, so the judge granted her a little grace in that regard, still serving 30, but not a whole lot difference. She will also be on probation for 3 years. In her sentencing, the prosecution offered 15 pieces of evidence for the judge to consider in his decision, including her words directly from the night before.
Protest, riot, insurrection. Different people will use a different word.
I hope you're happy. This is what you wanted. This is what you got.
Yvonne St. Cyr has one she holds tight.
The crowd was peaceful. I'm telling you, I was there.
Peaceful. Marching in lockstep with the like-minded mass.
And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for
directed
some of them
through the former president.
Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong.
Woo!
Yvonne's cell phone,
yeah, this is America,
shows a story of a loyal follower.
Land of the communists. Welcome to the communist country of America.
It's an affinity that hasn't wavered since, even after it brought her 6 federal charges, all of them guilty.
Trump is a good man. Trump is fighting for us. He's trying to show us, because it's not him that's going to save us. It's us that's going to save us.
Yvonne posted a nearly hour-long video on Facebook the night before her sentencing, keeping the same tone.
But I know I didn't do anything wrong, and I know that that's the truth.
An antithesis to atonement.
What would Jesus do? Because I guarantee you Jesus would be right here with me in this.
Court documents show the prosecution offered the judge 15 pieces of evidence to consider. It includes videos that show Yvonne refusing officer orders.
Go, go, go!
Her calling on others to do the same.
Go, we gotta get out.
And a 4-minute edit
Not until then.
of this 1-hour live stream the day before sentencing.
They have to fight for
Exhibit
all of us.
15.
There's over 700 people that have been wrongfully accused.
St. Cyr includes herself in that tally,
I guess I'll just go ahead and say it.
calling corruption over the nation's government
Oh,
and justice system.
I just got sentenced to 30 months.
It's a fraction under the prosecution's proposal. Serving few favors, she submitted 2 letters from family alongside her own testament,
So this is my letter so far that I have.
addressed to the judge.
I do not consent, nor do I or will I comply. I am a free, divine, sovereign being who was born on this earth with inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
She wrote 5,000 words.
He stopped me at page 2 and said, how much longer is this going to be? And I said, well, it's 7 pages. And he goes, well, I guess I have to let you read it. And so he continued to let me until I got to page 5. And then he said, you've got 1 minute to finish this. There is no more freedom, guys.
Even after more than 2.5 years later,
It's over. It's over.
repeating the same sentiment to a similar result.
We tried. We tried. We tried.
St. Cyr will have a reporting date that she says is in about 6 weeks. That's when she voluntarily turns herself in and serves that 30-month sentence in prison. For Idahoans specifically, we know there are 5 others who have been charged with crimes participating in these January 6th riots. Most of the information we've been able to collect on them, that's from the Department of Justice. And Brian, 4 out of those 5 have pled guilty. Yvonne, however, refuses to admit that anything she did was wrong, even after conviction, even after sentencing.
Which is the opposite of somebody like Pam Hemphill, who said, yeah, I was wrong, and I'm not following that anymore.
Yeah.
So, quite different take. All right, thank you very much, Andrew. Well, to say there's a rift within Idaho's Republican Party, well, might be the most obvious no-duh statement I've said today. The dynamic of the traditional establishment Republicans against a newer brand of GOPers who don't shy away from inter-party conflict. They don't shy away from purging members either, but there's a strong contingent of this party who's not letting go of their party, who refuse to be purged. And a lot of them showed themselves today at the state capitol. Familiar faces, leaders of the Republican Party of the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s. They all stood in support of an idea to open Idaho's primary elections. The GOP has closed its primaries. They've done that since 2012. Elections in which only registered Republicans can vote. Well, that move, Joe Paris tells us, has led to a party minority not necessarily concerned with what the majority of the party and a majority of Idaho wants.
Leaders with the initiative group Idahoans for Open Primaries are confident the people of the Gem State support their idea to change how Idaho's elections work.
I'll guarantee you it will be up for a vote in 2024. It's going to be a game changer.
Retired Idaho Supreme Court Justice Jim Jones is a leader with Idahoans for Open Primaries. Jones, speaking at the state capitol on Wednesday, says longtime Republicans support the open primary concept as a way to rein in extreme Idaho GOP behavior.
I heard from so many of those people, like Sally Patano and Jack Riggs, how the Republicans in their area have just gone off the rails. And they don't attend to business like Republicans did years ago.
The initiative aims to change primaries to an open format with instant runoff general elections. This is also called ranked choice voting. In short, primary elections would include all political parties. The top 4 vote getters in the primary, regardless of their political affiliation, would go on to the general election. Voters would then rank their top 4 in the general election, with the winner needing at least 50% of the vote.
We got to work as hard as they do and be nice about it.
Former Idaho Governor Butch Otter is one of 116 community-known Republicans statewide that align as traditional Republicans in support of this initiative. To him, this is about bringing civility back to the Idaho GOP and state politics. I asked him for his thoughts on the state GOP led by Chair Dorothy Moon.
I would say they have some extremist ways. I don't think to the core the whole Central Committee is that way, because there was some pretty good battles. There was some pretty good resistance to doing what the party eventually did. And that's a good thing. And that's something that I see that looks promising.
Idaho Republican Party leaders like Chair Moon have spoken out numerous times against the initiative. They say it will allow Democrats to select Republican nominees. Otter believes the initiative would simply result in the best leaders.
Anybody that is against the open primary is I think is concerned about their own individual particular race, and they're being selfish with the voters.
Republicans who disagree worry the initiative invites outsiders into their party race, some going as far as to call the campaign a liberal plot to exploit the Republican stronghold of Idaho. Chair Moon wrote in an August newsletter, quote, "Make no mistake, this initiative is a pernicious plot to take away your ability to vote for conservative lawmakers. The blanket primary takes away your right to nominate your own candidates. Just as BYU doesn't get to decide who starts at quarterback for Boise State, neither should Democrats get to vote on who represents the Republican Party in the general election." I asked Otter about a line former GOP Chair Tom Luna mentioned frequently. This idea that the Republican Party in Idaho is a big tent that has a variety of conservatives welcome to it. The former governor doesn't see it like that anymore.
I think it's become very narrow, and I think it's shoved a lot of people out from participation and out from activity.
Supporters need to gather around 63,000 signatures by May 1st to qualify the initiative for the November 2024 ballot. I do want to add, though, I heard from Chair Moon a short time ago, and I'll include her full statement at ktvb.com. But in part, Chair Moon says this evening, quote, the overlap between the so-called Republicans who are endorsing the ranked choice voting initiative and those who supported the Democrat candidate in last year's race for Attorney General is indeed noteworthy. She continues and points out that the Republican Party at both the national RNC level and state levels, they've already overwhelmingly rejected ranked choice voting with strong resolutions and legislation. And she wraps up saying that it is crucial to reject the divisive rhetoric that Butch Otter uses, attempting to label the grassroots of the party and the Idaho GOP leadership as radical extremists, end quote. Again, you can read Chair Moon's full statement in this article shortly at ktvb.com.
Divisive rhetoric, yet she uses terms like so-called Republicans in this little release that she put out today. A lot of people look to party leadership being places like, the governor, lieutenant governor, elected congressmen and stuff, but that's not where this is. That's not where this started anyway.
Yeah, and I think it's very important to talk about, the traditional Republicans, we'll call them just for this segment. They talk about, their concerns with the Idaho GOP, the leadership in some of the area. Well, the reason that some of these people are in power is because they won elections. If you talk about committee precincts, for example, that's
which
something
nobody really pays attention to.
Nobody really pays attention to, but those are the people that get to help set the party, the rules, and really, push the direction of the party. So Governor Otter saying here today that, they got to win elections and they have to work hard too. Passing this initiative doesn't just fix their problems. Elections matter.
Grassroots stuff. All right. Thank you very much, Joe. Well, when Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy announced he was authorizing an impeachment inquiry into President Biden, we, of course, reached out to Idaho's congressmen to find out where they stand on such actions. That, of course, was yesterday, and we, of course, heard nothing until this morning. Congressman Mike Simpson, his office, getting back to us, saying he supports Speaker McCarthy's decision. The American people deserve transparency and answers from their elected officials, he said. And while impeachment is not something he takes lightly, he's pretty sure Chairman Jordan, Smith, and Comer will conduct a fair and appropriate inquiry, which is quite the different take from the one he took just a week after the January 6th riot at the Capitol, when President Trump faced his second impeachment. Simpson calling that impeachment a personal and political attack, adding it's tough to empathize with those who think differently than ourselves, but we must seek common ground. And, quote, both sides must stop shouting into their respective echo chambers and at each other. At least Congressman Simpson responded to us. And speaking of echo chambers, since hitting send on our email to Congressman Russ Fulcher's office, it's been crickets. But Mr. Fulcher, well, he has gone on 2 local radio shows to talk at length about it. December 7th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy. But for Japanese Americans, there are a few other infamous days from that era, like February 19th, 1942, the day President Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, which allowed for the forced removal of all persons deemed a threat to national security from the West Coast to areas inland. And August 10th, 1942, the day the first Japanese Americans walked into the Minidoka incarceration camp. Those 3 days mean a lot to Barbara Bethune, and her story is a lot like others. Very similar to the tens of thousands of descendants of the 13,000 Japanese Americans held captive at Minidoka. Except Barbara has shared her story publicly for the past 25 years, stopping by classrooms and community centers, telling the tale of her family and thousands others, those who lost everything and were sent to Dusty's deserts like in southern Idaho. Well, today she was in Kuna, where she grew up. Well, near where she grew up. It was actually Beaumont, Idaho, between Melba and Nampa, where Barbara says there was a beet dump and a grocery store, and that's about it. That wasn't where their family started, though. Barbara's parents were born in Fife, Washington. They were Nisei, second-generation Japanese Americans, but the first generation born in the United States. And Barbara says the exclusion orders showed up in Seattle in April of 1942. They were given a week's notice and were allowed just 2 suitcases. By May, the Sagami family was figuring out how to live in the Western Washington Fairgrounds in Puyallup.
They called it Camp Harmony. A lot of euphemisms about this period of history. Camp Harmony, pioneer communities, relocation, internment, everything except that it was incarceration in a concentration camp, targeting one group of people whose crime was they looked like the enemy.
The reserved Japanese culture of keeping quiet, Barbara says, kept them from calling it what it was and kept their stories hidden for years.
The shame and the humiliation of being incarcerated because of what you look like has to be absolutely devastating. And how do you recover from that? How do you describe it? What do you say?
Is that why you didn't learn about it until later?
My parents did not say a word.
It wasn't until she was a senior at Kuna High School when Barbara says she first heard about Minidoka.
So I went home and asked my mom. So my poor mom. So I was so angry when I found out that did happen. I just nailed her and I said, how could you let that happen? Why'd you let these people do it? Why didn't you put up a fight? What I didn't realize was they had no education, formal education. They had no economics means, no political clout, minority, perfect victims. I didn't realize at the time, I was just mad.
It was also about that time when Barbara pieced together another part
yes, Uncle Yohe.
Of her family's past.
So, but my mom had a drawer of pictures. And so I'd always go and look at that, and I saw this handsome man. And my mom said it was Uncle Yohe.
Yohei Sagami was one of the thousands of incarcerated Americans to volunteer to fight for his country in 1944. The irony was not lost on Barbara.
The shame of being not fit to serve in 1942, 43, and then all of a sudden you're draftable.
Uncle Yohei was a member of the legendary 442nd Regimental Combat Team.
This was the famous and unique battalion composed of Americans of Japanese ancestry. Volunteers all.
Their motto? Go for broke.
This attitude made the 442nd the most decorated unit for its size and time of service in Army history.
Uncle Yohei landed in France in September 1944. A month later, he was killed in the Battle of Bruyères. He was just 22.
I just developed such an affinity, and I thought, wow, you know what? He represents the first Nisei killed in the Battle of Bruyères. He represents a lot, and he represents a lot to our family that shouldn't be forgotten.
Which is why Barbara puts her Uncle Yohei front and center for her presentation.
He wrote a letter to my mom in August of 1944 before he was sent to Europe.
Dearest Michi, hello, sis. And I do mean dearest, no lie.
And it's a typical letter about looking his past, how much he loved his family, things weren't pleasant, how much he misses his mom.
Tell her not to worry about us too much.
And it's a very moving letter, and it just represents so much about why these guys decided to fight and go.
What was that reason?
They wanted to prove they were loyal Americans. They wanted a better life for their children and their grandchildren.
Barbara says the fact her family story, and others like hers, wasn't talked about for so long is why she won't let it be forgotten. Because it's personal for you.
Very personal, yes.
And because in today's culture of hysteria and misinformation, she doesn't want to see it repeated.
If you look at the way the Japanese were targeted and minority groups, they label them. So they have the same labels, they just change targets.
We see that today.
Yes, yes. And so you think of people with no power, no political clout, no economic means, and things could happen to a marginalized group of people.
Any marginalized group of people. We've talked about this before, how Executive Order 9066 was pushed through and based on lies and bigotry. There was never any evidence of criminal activity by any Japanese American that would justify the forced removal. Information the government knew, by the way, before the incarceration began. Barbara's uncle Yohei was honored in 2016 with a granite monument near the town in France where he was killed, and it still stands today. Barbara was back there visiting, has been there back there a couple of years since. You can see and hear Barbara's story tonight at 7 at the Cuna High School Performing Arts Auditorium.
Well, it has been a beautiful Wednesday thus far, a little bit cooler than the last couple of days thanks to a cool front that slid across the Gem State early this morning, but it's been a beautiful crystal clear sky over the Boise area, 83 degrees. That's as warm as we've been so far today. The winds, though, a little bit of a nuisance or maybe a nice refreshing change depending on your perspective. We've had 15 to 20 mile per hour winds throughout the day today. As we look ahead to the next 12 hours, sunset now at 7:58. Last night was our last sunset in the 8 o'clock hour, and so you'll see temperatures dropping in the mid-70s at sunset, dipping down into those low to mid-50s overnight for tomorrow morning. We'll hit 82 on Thursday, a gorgeous day coming our way. Picture perfect, in my humble opinion. Lighter winds tomorrow and really comfy temperatures. After that, we start warming up again. A hot final weekend of summer, 90 degrees. Lots going on this weekend. It'll be perfect for all of that. Then the bottom drops out on Tuesday with a high of 71 degrees and lows on Wednesday into the mid-40s. The 208 continues right after this.
All right, several comments today on the open primaries, the press conference that happened today at the state capitol, including this one from Di, who says she applauds former Governor Butch Otter on his views regarding the primary elections. Boo to Miss Moon, even as an independent voter, you're not allowed to vote in the primary election. It's time for everyone to voice their own vote. It's not the right of the Republican Party. What are they afraid of, she asks. Far right seems to be succeeding in limiting our right to vote, banning books, and making medical decisions for others. Sounds like communism to the 208, says Bev. While I'm not thrilled by ranked choice voting, says Bill, maybe that's what it will take to reclaim reasonable representation of moderate Idaho Republicans. And that's the view of a lot of people, which is why they stood up today to make sure their view was heard on where people should stand on this ranked choice voting. This one from Charlie. We visited Minidoka this summer on the day when relatives came to honor their families. I was deeply moved by the horror of this past deed our country did to these innocents. That's right. Every year, maybe not every year, but we did it a couple years ago. They have a pilgrimage where descendants of the people that were incarcerated in Minidoka come back and take a tour. And it's a very involved tour. And if you have a chance to be there, to even take a tour on your own, it's well worth it. You should do it. But it's more moving when you're with these people who have been there or have a tie to it. See you tomorrow.